Dana White has had a very problematic tenure as president of UFC.
You don't have to fight. Anybody that doesn't want to fight doesn't have to fight.
From not paying some fighters enough to saying some fighters don't want to fight. And now, Francis Ngannou made it on his list of these fighters. But who else is on the list? Conor McGregor for one. Conor McGregor is one of the biggest names in UFC. And according to some fans of the sport, Conor has been discriminated against in the past by Dana. Although he's one of the highest paid fighters in the UFC.
That's what McGregor just did there. This could be it.
In 2020, Conor told his fans something that surprised us all. He said that his false retirement announcements were nothing but a negotiation tactic. Why? Well, he said it was all because of the issues he had with UFC executives who, according to him, wanted to show power and stomp all over me. So it was established that the retirement was not real and all just a negotiation tactic. But that didn't stop Dana from saying what he did. When asked about McGregor's gripes, Dana said, "No, Conor McGregor is retired." He also said that he doesn't chase fighters who don't want to fight. He said that UFC offers every fighter 3 fights per year. And if a fighter isn't interested in fighting, he has a ton of other guys who would quickly take their place. He said all this in context to the Conor McGregor drama back in June of 2020. The drama settled down a bit, and Conor got back in the ring to fight 2 more fighters after a few months. Unfortunately, he had no luck in the fights, and ended up losing them both to Dustin Poirier.
McGregor covers up towards the end of the round.
Speaking of Dustin, the Diamond is also on Dana's infamous list. Okay, so some of you might remember when this all went down. It all happened back in September of 2020, when Dustin Poirier and Tony Ferguson tried to set up a fight against each other. Why? Well, we don't know their exact motives, or how many reasons they had to go forward with the fight. But one big reason for Dustin was that Dustin really wanted a raise. Unfortunately, the UFC boss shut down and stopped the fight from happening. Dana talked about the fight that he apparently didn't want to happen, and said that it's not like he doesn't like Dustin. He likes him as a fighter at UFC. Dana added that he was not going to sit in front of interviewers and say anything negative about one of his favorite fighters at UFC, and he didn't. He's a great kid, White added. But Dana said he was confused about the whole thing that Dustin was doing. He said he wasn't sure if the reason behind it all was that Dustin didn't want to fight in Abu Dhabi or something else. Dana also said that there are a lot of ways to avoid a fight you don't want to fight. Negotiating yourself out of it is one way, but he still wasn't sure why Dustin didn't want to fight, and said that only Dustin would know the reason behind it all.
He does not big punch.
Poirier tweeted as soon as he found out what Dana had said, and tweeted that he did want the fight, in all caps, so you know he really wanted it. But unfortunately, the Poirier vs. Ferguson fight did not get booked. In the same year, there were 2 more fighters who made it on the list:
And knocks out Eddie Alvarez.
Jon Jones and Jorge Masvidal. Looks like 2020 was the year that a bunch of really good fighters were damned to be on Dana's list of fighters that he thinks don't want to fight. In 2020, Jon Jones and Jorge Masvidal decided to break their silence and told the public about how unhappy they were with the UFC pay structure. But unfortunately, this all didn't go as planned. Dana apparently didn't like this, and instead of giving the fighters compensation, Dana misled the media. He said that the fighters were independent contractors and that they just didn't want to fight. Dana talked about it, saying that he remembers the time it was the pandemic and the media was asking him about what would happen if the fighters got worried and didn't want to fight anymore.
Well, you don't have to fight. Anybody that doesn't want to fight doesn't have to fight.
To these questions, White said that anyone who doesn't want to fight doesn't have to fight, before name-dropping Masvidal and Jon Jones. He then said that even if the reason for these fighters refusing to fight isn't the ongoing pandemic, they don't have to fight if they don't want to. Masvidal didn't agree with White on a lot of things, and he made sure that everyone knew about his disapproval. He first pointed out how Dana lied about him being a free contractor, saying that if he were a free contractor, he would have been able to go anywhere and make a living, which he can't do. He also told White to not compare UFC fighters to fighters from other leagues. Why? Well, he mentioned how fighters from other leagues make around half of the revenue they generate from fights, while UFC fighters only get around 12 to a maximum of 18% of what they generate. No amount of speaking up against him changed the fact that he ended up on Dana's list. This isn't much different from the fate of the next fighter on Dana's list, Francis Ngannou. Okay, so this one is the most recent fighter that made it on the list. Side note, it's so funny how everyone is talking about making it on this list like it's a great accomplishment. Earlier in January this year, Francis fought out of his UFC deal. He won that fight and beat Ciryl Gane in 5 rounds. After that, he retained his UFC heavyweight title. Ngannou took the fight against his doctor's advice. Now that was a bad idea, but it goes to show how determined he is and how much he loves doing what he does, which is fighting. And he's been doing pretty great as well. But Dana, for some reason, is trying his best to portray Francis as a scared, weak fighter. White put out his statement about it, as Ngannou was leaving after a failed negotiation. He said that he thinks that Francis is at a place right now where he's being cautious, and he's trying not to take any risks in his career. White said that in Francis's head, he thinks he's in a really good place career-wise, where he doesn't have to fight a lot of strong opponents and can still make a lot of money. Now, that's a weird thing to say, no? Of course, folks have a lot of opinions about Ngannou making it to the list. Some even congratulated him. There's Cris Cyborg for one. After it was announced that Francis was released from the UFC, a lot of fans and other fighters commented on it. One of these people was former UFC fighter Cris Cyborg. We all know the only reason fighters make it onto Dana's infamous list of fighters who don't want to fight is if said fighters can't agree on a deal with the UFC. Or in simple words, if they don't play by Dana's demands. And as we all know, that's what happened with Francis. Cris tweeted about the whole deal with screenshots of searches showing the news of Francis ending up on the said list. She wrote, "Congrats at Francis Ngannou on making it to the list," tagging Francis in the tweet. I'm glad that fighters are finally taking this list as a joke, because someone's opinion, even if it's the president of the UFC, shouldn't define what kind of fighter these fighters are. And that's all about Dana White's ever-growing list of fighters he claims don't want to fight. See you all in the next video.
Champion of the world!